Welcome to the Operators Association podcast. This is our 9th episode, and I am your host, John Allen. I am a former Navy SEAL, and I am one of the co-founders of the Operators Association Mentorship Group, along with Zach Hughes, who is a former Green Beret. Today is going to be another mailbag style episode. I think that there are so many questions being forwarded to myself and to Zach and to Josh, and frankly, just within the Slack channel that we have for the $25 tier, there's more questions in some ways than we can possibly answer. And so I actually think that probably this podcast is most beneficial if we're just digging into a couple key questions every week and getting as granular as we can possibly get. And then also, providing that, high level kind of reminder that special operations, whether it's going into the SEAL teams, going into, the Green Berets, whatever it is, it's far more accessible than it appears. And so we want that to be at the center of everything we put out, is that this is totally a path that is possible. You just need to understand what you're getting yourself into and go in fully committed. And we want you guys to feel like not only are you getting information, very useful and specific information from Operators Association, whether it's from this podcast or one of our other content pieces, but you're also being reminded that normal people become operators all the time. And this is a very accessible thing. It's just something you need to really dig into. So with that in mind, today we have a list of questions that are primarily focused on SEAL training. And let me know if this podcast is becoming overly SEAL-centric, because obviously when the mailbag is being answered by me, my experience is being in the SEAL teams. And so, naturally I'm gonna speak to that experience. But even though I'm offering up very specific information at times about BUDS and SEAL selection, much of my experience throughout selection is very similar to what you're going to experience in other selection courses. I'm not speaking, directly because I know that, but having spoken with Zach and many other folks from other units, selection is selection. BUDS may be unique in that it's a little bit longer and has this water element to it, but there's a lot of overlap between the different selection courses. And so, I wouldn't, if you're gung-ho on being a Green Beret, I think that there's valuable information that you can pull, even if the discussion in this podcast, for example, is about BUDS, SEAL training. I think there's some valuable information you can pull that is, relatable to your own pipeline, the SF pipeline, and other pipelines as well. But today I wanted to get into talking really specifically about what it's like when you show up to BUDS on the first day. And I'm not just talking about, the start of first phase, which is, you can pretty much Google what it's like when first phase starts. The chaos, the running around, the instructors yelling at you, all that. We'll get into that on this episode. But I'm talking about really when you've gone through the first few months of the pipeline, and this is the enlisted route. When you've gone through boot camp in Chicago, which is 2 months, you've gone through the follow-on BUDS prep course, which is also in Chicago, which is 2 months. And then you show up to San Diego. I think that one of the important pieces of information I can pass is how to handle those first few days when you arrive in Coronado after BUDS prep, but before training begins. Because there is a little bit of a gap there where you absolutely have things you're responsible for, but it's a great opportunity for some folks to get psyched out before it even starts, because now you're there, you're within a few days of really seeing what you're made of, years in the making for some of you if you've trained a bunch, and you've been thinking about this for a while. I'd like to give you guys some insight into what those first few days in San Diego look like. Everything from what do the rooms look like, where do you go shop, what are the expectations of you, as much information as I can pass, because I think if you're armed with that, when you arrive in San Diego, if you're in the SEAL pipeline, you'll have a much better understanding of what to expect. Because believe it or not, one of the questions that I answer a whole bunch from the folks that are leaving Buds Prep is really centered on like, hey, I'm going to Buds, I'm going to San Diego, tomorrow. What can I expect? And it's funny, you don't think about it, but like, you're not going to show up and start first phase day one. It's going to be a little ways into it. So let's do that. Let's talk about the first few weeks in San Diego, and then we will get into, to actually first phase. Okay, so let's just fast forward to you finished Buds Prep. Realistically, the attrition from starting boot camp in Chicago through Buds Prep, which will be effectively 4 months later, so boot camp through Buds Prep, the attrition rate, I don't even know if they keep an attrition rate because it's so low. The people that are washing out at that point either were truly not serious at all and should never have gotten a contract. And to be honest, anyone who's on this channel, I feel perfectly comfortable saying this. Anyone on this channel has really taken the initiative to seek out some pretty serious information and guidance, which in my mind makes you far more serious. And so I really don't think any of you are going to fall into the attrition category from like the mental side of things, just getting through the first four months of the pipeline, because you're really not doing anything in the pipeline yet. You're really just kind of checking boxes, getting through Navy indoctrination, and kind of working your way towards the start of training. So I wouldn't worry about attrition. You'll get through the first 4 months. I've talked a little bit about the difficulty of treading at Buds Prep, but it's not something that people wash out for. It's just kind of a gut check. So let's fast forward to you've completed Buds Prep. And by completed, there's actually something specific you need to do at the end of Buds Prep. And it is, if you haven't done one already, it's a PST, which is your physical screening test. You take it, I'm sure many of you listening have taken one or many to try to earn your contract, your SEAL selection contract. You take a PST at the end of prep, same as you would before you join the Navy to earn your contract, like I was saying. I believe that the Buds Prep PST is slightly modified. I think it's a little bit longer. I think instead of a 1.5 mile run, it's like a 3 mile run. And I think there's a couple other things that they changed slightly, but you're in such good shape. I mean, again, there was one person I remember not making it past that PST, and I had noticed he was really kind of falling off anyways and just didn't seem that committed to the program to begin with. So the people that, were even moderately serious get through it, and you've now completed Buds Prep. I remember that we completed Buds Prep, I want to say on a Monday or Tuesday. So it was like midweek. We took our final PST, and the way it works is, you're given orders. You're given orders to go to Buds. And so the way orders works, something you get very, very familiar with in the military, you're literally given this bizarre document. It's 6 pages long of all crammed onto a page typing, just text that has, even though it's 8 pages long, really on the first page of this sheet of orders, it has, where you are and where you're going and where you need to get there by, and expectations of, what you're going to do when you get there. But it's written in military jargon. But what it'll do is it'll tell you when you are leaving and when you need to arrive by. And it'll say going to basic underwater demolition SEAL training, arrive no later than whatever date. And it'll probably be the following week. But you're not really in charge of your transportation, because you're going to be flown with your cohort or some group of your cohort, your classmates that are going to be in your Buds class. You're all going to fly kind of as a unit out to Coronado. But anyways, we wrapped up on, I do think it was actually a Tuesday, and I want to say we only were in Chicago for one additional day in between, that Wednesday. We were given our orders. We picked them up at the end of the day on Tuesday. They had them already printed out for all of us. Wednesday, I think, was just a day off. I think that we all just packed. I remember I went out in town that Tuesday night with my very close inner circle of friends that, we were all excited and actually knew each other in boot camp and actually before as well. So there's 4 of us. We went out, grabbed a drink on Tuesday night. And we're excited. And Wednesday, we kind of just packed up and just were waiting anxiously. And then that night, Wednesday night, everything was packed. We went to bed. And then I think it was very early. I want to say 2 or 3 in the morning on Thursday. We had to muster, downstairs, and we hopped on a bus. We made our way over to the airport, and we hopped on a plane, and we arrived in San Diego. And we got there, early in the morning. By the time we got there, it was in the morning on Thursday. And the interesting thing that happens is immediately there was a culture change from Chicago to San Diego. And you notice it immediately. For anybody on here who has been through this process, the culture in Chicago, relative to the folks that are in the SEAL pipeline, I'm talking really specifically to that group, is you are really in the Navy's grasp more than you are in the special operations grasp. And what I mean by that is, in Chicago, you don't really feel like you're kind of a part of special operations yet. It feels like you're part of the big military, you're part of big Navy, you're part of just a big machine, because you're in Chicago, and really, with the exception of this little tiny, contingent of SEAL instructors and SWIC instructors that are out there to help with BUDS prep, that whole area is just where basic Navy indoctrination takes place. And the people you're around overwhelmingly are going to be going into regular Navy jobs, and everywhere you go, the kind of feel and vibe is very traditional, buttoned up military. And it's not bad. It's different. It feels very rigid, and it feels like what you would imagine on TV when you think of rigid military, order. Now, BUDS prep is not like that, because BUDS prep is great. And you're in this little oasis within the military where you have cool civilian instructors and stuff. But overall, your time in Chicago will feel like you're in the military. It will feel rigid. But you won't know any better because you've never been in the military before. So I remember really enjoying it. It was fine by me. But you get to San Diego, and your officers will meet you, usually at the airport. For us, it was, and they're not waiting there to meet all of you. It's in waves. They have officers they have a different pipeline. They arrive in Coronado ahead. When I was going through prep, they actually made an appearance in BUDS prep and trained with us a little bit, and then they went out to Coronado ahead of us, and they kind of get the lay of the land. I don't really know what they do out there, but the officers, it takes a lot longer for them to class up, and usually they might be in Coronado for as much as a month or even 2, just kind of waiting for the next group of enlisted from Chicago to arrive so that they can take charge of the class and then join the class and go through with you. But when they arrive at the airport, or rather when they're there to pick up your group, you'll be looking at each other, meaning, the enlisted guys that have just flown in from Chicago. You'll be looking at your kind of classmates, and you're going to be in uniform, and you're going to be pale because you've been in Chicago this whole time. I was there in the winter, so it was just snow and absolutely never outside. Besides BUDS prep, but even then it was limited because it was cold. And you're gonna be in this uniform, and you just look like you came out of the hole in the ground or something. And you see your officers who've been over at the BUDS compound for sometimes, like I said, about a month or more, and they've adjusted to being there, and they're wearing flip-flops, board shorts, and a t-shirt, cool sunglasses, and they just look cool as hell. These are your officers that are going to be in class, in BUDS with you. And I remember meeting our first couple officers, and what they do is they basically help us get on the buses, and they bring you over to the actual BUDS compound from the airport, and it takes just a few minutes to ride over there. But you they look tan, and they look like they've been there, and you're oh my God, look at me. I'm in my dress uniform, and I look so stiff and awkward, and you're in this beautiful San Diego place, and you just feel like you stand out, and you're just eager to just get to the compound, check in so you can change and put on shorts and a t-shirt and look like a human being again. But it's interesting. You don't really have a chance to chat with your officers very much, right, when you get to the airport, just because there's so much to do between getting all the people flown to San Diego in waves and then bussed over to the compound and then be checked in. There's a lot of stuff happening. So I wouldn't expect to have like a powwow with your officers, but if you have a chance, I'd walk up to one of your O's, introduce yourself, and just ask them what it's like. How has it been, being in Coronado? How long have they been there? Because probably they've been there for at least a couple of weeks waiting for you and your class. And so we rode the bus, like literally the public transportation bussed us over to the actual Buds compound, and you'll cross over the Coronado Bridge, and you'll have this beautiful view of Coronado, the island. And you make your way down Orange Ave, through the downtown area where you're going to be getting your haircut every single week with everybody else in Buds. Past, I forget the name of it. There's like a very, very popular pancake place. It's like a coffee shop. What is it called? Either way, you'll know what it is. It's like called Carlton's or something. It's on the left. It's like where everybody goes for breakfast on the weekends, Buds Kids. And then you make your way down the Strand and you get to the Buds compound, so the Buds compound is split into two parts. Well, actually, that's not true. The base that you are going to be really training out of is broken into two parts. As you're driving down the Strand towards Mexico, on your right is the Buds compound. It's the Buds side. It's also called the wet side, and it's because that's where the Pacific Ocean is, and that's where the vast majority of your training happens in Buds. On the left side is the dry side, and it's really the same base, both sides, but it's separated by this road, the Silver Strand that cuts it down the middle. On the left side, the dry side, you actually do a fair amount of training, but it's mostly going to be, well, on the dry side, that's where the pool is. That's where the second phase pool is that you'll definitely use quite a bit. There's, I think it's called Freedom Field or something. It's out there, and that's a place where, when you're in BOW, basic orientation, you'll do some stuff over there, some training. Part of Hell Week, definitely, like Steel Pier is on the dry side. When you do the Around the World in Hell Week, you'll pass around, the dry side. But the stuff that you see and know and have heard of in first phase, like surf torture and runs and O courses and all that, that's going to be on the wet side, on the right side. But when we arrived, we first went to the wet side, which is way smaller. It's a way smaller base than the dry side. And again, I think they are the exact same base that is split down the middle, but the dry side is just way bigger than the wet side. And it's where a lot of non-Navy special warfare stuff is happening, because this base is not just special warfare, it's a Navy base. It just happens to be the place where SEALs are made and SWCS are made. So anyways, you go on the wet side, and also it's going to be where all the SEAL teams are too. So all the West Coast SEAL teams are on the wet side, and you'll see team guys just walking around like having a normal day, going to their team, working out, going to supply and getting, their vehicles cleaned out, whatever they're doing. They're used to seeing Bud students. Remember that. You're not going to stand out beyond being like everything else they see all the time. They're used to seeing Buds kids come in and out of there all the time. So don't worry about like people thinking you look conspicuous. You actually don't really. You stand out as a brand new Buds kid, but they're used to seeing this. So they're probably not going to really even pay attention to you. And if they'd say or yell at you or anything, it's, honestly, it's kind of funny. Like you feel like you're part of the scene, now. So I wouldn't stress about seeing team guys, but you go on the wet side. And what we did is we went over to the admin office, which is, I think it's right near the first phase barracks. And the Buds component, like the first phase barracks, the grinder, second phase building, the dive tower, even though we don't use it, all the really specific Bud stuff is actually gated within the wet side. And you need to go through a gate guard or go through the quarterdeck, which leads on to the grinder to get in there. So like you'll be inside that gated area, which is, the teams are gated too, but they're not part of this little subset that you're going to be a part of. So you go into that gated area, and so right across from the first phase barracks is the admin office, and we all lined up with our orders in hand, the stuff we got in Chicago. And we one by one went in and got our orders stamped in the admin office. And that just means that once they've been stamped officially, it's like you've arrived, because they need to make sure you're arriving at the time you were supposed to arrive. So you check in, you arrive. There's an initial gear issue. So the officers at this point are kind of helping each of us. And there was a couple hundred of us checking in at once. They would let us... We would get our orders stamped, and then they would walk us over to supply, which is outside of the gated area, but just on the outside of the fence, because the teams also use the same supply area. And you'd go over there, and you'd receive your initial gear loadout, which is hilariously sparse. Because remember, statistically, almost everybody quits, right? And so they don't issue you a bunch of stuff at first, because they have no idea who's going to be around for longer than a couple days. So you get issued a canteen, which you carry with you everywhere, and you put tape around it and stencil it, same as you would have done, I think, in Bud's prep. I believe you get an Alice pack, which is a rucksack, that like famous military frame with the green olive drab little pack and back. You get fins, so the rocket fins. You get UDT shorts, those tan, hilarious short shorts. And you'll see the famous on the back where all the names have been one-lined and replaced by another name, because people quit. And realistically, if you graduate, you'll probably end up... I still have my UDT shorts and everything I was issued, even though I was probably supposed to turn it in. So you get an initial loadout, some simple stuff. And then I think that we were told to head across the street to the dry side barracks. And one thing to know is that in Buds, or really any time you're on the wet side, or the dry side, but much more so on the wet side, because there was a lot of eyes on you, SEAL team eyes. You have all the commands there. You have Warcom over there. You have all these high-ranking Navy SEALs that are there. The way that you walk around, or not even, the way that you run around the wet side, is you're always with a group of people. You can't go anywhere on your own. Like, it starts the day you arrive. Literally, you arrive, and the day you arrive, you have to be with a group. You can't be on your own. The only time you get to kind of be on your own walking around is once you've, I think, go to SQT. That's when you can start walking around that base and acting like a normal person. But until then, you are with a swim buddy or with a group, and it's very kind of like rigid. You will like wait kind of in hiding for a group to go do anything, and then you kind of all go as a group wherever you got to go, and you run in formation and all that. And this will be explained to you by your officers, but the point is they're going to probably have you, after you do your initial admin check-in, go across the street to the dry side, where, unless it's changed, because it may have, the dry side is where the barracks for the new check-ins is. So when you have not started first phase, which is not right away, you start first phase like maybe a few weeks or a month after arriving in Coronado. When you're in new check-in days / basic orientation, which is the first thing you do over there, you stay at the dry side barracks, which is this big open bay, meaning there's no rooms. It's like these big rooms like boot camp with bunk beds. And you go over there, and there's this cool like barracks that's right in the middle. Across the street from the barracks is this little, it's called an MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Readiness. It's basically like a lounge for people on base to go play video games and play pool and stuff. And over there is like the first time you get to kind of catch your breath, because once you run across the street and you do the famous, like you run across that silver strand where when you're in phase, every single time you cross that street, I think you have to yell Hooyah as a class, like every single time. And so you'll run across there, you'll go into the dry side, probably one of your O's will take you, and you'll go over to the barracks on the dry side, and that is like you're kind of now in hiding, right? Like you'll probably have some meeting that night where your O's are going to round you guys up and kind of give you the rundown of expectations over the next few days. But there's like unless you're like the last group to arrive, probably the O's, the officers of your class, are just kind of going to go back and forth to the airport and getting people over to the wet side to check in, get their initial gear load out, and then ferry them back over to the dry side. So probably you'll have a chance to like put your stuff down inside the dry side barracks and go over to the NEX. So the NEX is like it's a common acronym in the Navy. It's like it's a convenience store, but it's on base and it's a Navy convenience store. It stands for the Navy Exchange. And you go over to the necks. There's a necks on the dry side and the wet side, but you're not going to be using the wet side necks, which we call the surf shop, until you're actually in first phase. So you're just going to use the dry side. You can go over there, pick up some boot polish and whatever else you want to pick up, food, snacks. But this is where we actually get into some specific stuff. So when you get to the dry side barracks, you're going to meet with kids that are in buds, or I should say that have already they've been rolled. You're going to meet rollbacks that are already at the barracks. They checked in months ago with the previous class or whatever class they arrived with, but they didn't make it out of basic orientation. They did not get to first phase. They didn't get out of basic orientation. So I remember there being quite a few people. For us, it was people that had not successfully tested out of basic orientation, meaning you need to pass your run times and swim times and your all your different scores that you do while you're in bow. You need to score at the upper percentage of the class in order to be allowed to move on to first phase. And so there were some people that just didn't perform, and so they got rolled. There were people that failed tests or got hurt. There's a bunch of people that don't get into first phase, and so they get rolled. And it's their first roll. And so they're waiting for your class, to arrive. And I've talked about this with some people on the phone. I've talked about this, I think, on another podcast. I've talked about it on an IGTV movie. And I don't want this to come off as being mean, but since this forum, Operators Association, is designed to be really deliberate and hopefully useful advice, my advice is be very, very careful about buying into any of the things or sentiments that these rollbacks have or say or give off. What I mean is they have been rolled at the very earliest part of buds. Many of them have been rolled because they're simply not good enough for buds and they're not going to make it. And they probably know it. But for a brief moment in time, because you've just arrived and you've never experienced buds before at all, meaning maybe some of you have, but the vast majority, this is your first time there, they have something over you. They've been in training. You have not. Even though it's just bow, and maybe they got rolled on the first day of basic orientation because they got hurt, they have gone through something that you have not. And for the people that know, and I'm talking about the rollbacks, for the rollbacks that know they're not going to make it, because some of them know it. They're tourists. They know they aren't going to make it. They're pretending and they're acting like, this is what they want to do, but they know they're not there to graduate. They're there and they're surprised they're even there. But for a brief moment, they get to own the spotlight a little bit. So imagine if you're someone that's been to bow and you get rolled because you suck, and now you've been rolled and a new group shows up. Think how annoying you could be if you wanted to. New group comes in, you pull them aside and say, hey guys, listen up. I've been in bow and it's fucking hell. Man, they fuck with you and it's way harder than I thought it was going to be. Man, I got hurt. That's why I'm here. But man, you gotta really make sure you're dialed in when this thing starts. This thing's fucking so hard, right? Because they know they're not going to make it. So all they can do is just kind of make themselves seem really tough and kind of have power over you and make it seem like it's way harder than it is. I definitely ran into that. I ran into some people that put on this attitude of you don't know what you're getting yourself into. I've been there. I've seen the shit. That whole bullshit attitude. Anyone that talks to you or acts or gives the impression that buds is going to be harder than it seems is not your friend. They are not your fucking friend. The only people that you should be taking advice from are people that are making progress in the pipeline. It's one thing if you've been rolled, it's another if you've been rolled and you're making progress, right? Someone that's in second phase or post-Hell Week, those people have meaningful advice. Guys in SQT and SEALs, obviously, those are people that you can trust their opinion to a degree, right? But people that are I've made zero progress in the course, there's a very good chance they're not going to make it. And that's just the reality of it. There are definitely people that are rollbacks. These are bow rollbacks you're going to meet that are going to make it that are amazing, that are going to be awesome, that are going to be SEALs. And I met plenty of people that fall into that category. But they were helpful. They were friendly. They were humble. You know, one of the guy that I was racked with, who was on my bunk bed, he had been rolled. He got some infection in his leg, and he got rolled in bow. And he's like, yeah, stinks, man. I mean, I loved my class. My closest friends were in there, but what can I do? And sure enough, he was an awesome candidate. He got through all the training. He graduated, became a SEAL. And it was like all he wanted to do was help me when I got there. He like walked me over to the Next and like showed me which boot polish I should use, because there's a whole bunch of choices. He, showed me, what I can and can't do with my boots, at buds. There's like little things like that. Like the people that you're meeting, you should immediately be trying to identify, is this person a friend or a foe? A foe is someone that wants to lord the fact that they've been in bow over you. A friend is someone who's humble enough to recognize that, hey, I have experience because I've been in bow, but I want to give you something positive from it. I want to find a way to help you, and then hopefully in exchange you'll help me. Like that's how it should feel. And I'm not saying that all these guys are dicks when you go to rollback, or when you meet these rollbacks, but it's a reality. Okay? So when you arrive and you're at the barracks for the first time and you have a chance to catch your breath, go ahead and walk around, talk to some people that have been there. It'll be obvious who's already been there. It won't be hard to find these people. But I would say just be very cautious how you feel about what they have to say to you. I mean, if they're super friendly and offering advice, great. But even still, take it with a grain of salt. The reality is the people that you showed up with who are there for the first time have a much higher chance of success than the people who have been rolled already in bow. So, anyways, moving along. I forget how long it is before you start bow. For us, I want to say that we had admin and kind of check-in stuff that first day, that Thursday we arrived. We did that basically all day. We had a meeting in the evening where the whole class, or not the whole class, the whole group of us that arrived, plus the rollbacks who had been rolled from the previous class, we all met in the open space inside the barracks. It's an open bay barracks, like I said. It's this big L shape. And in the middle, there's this little parking lot where you kind of all meet, and your class leaders will stand on a picnic table and talk to you, and no instructors will be around. It'll be private, and they'll kind of give you the run of what needs to happen. You're not going to get a green helmet yet, although I believe we, as the classes will offer help to each other across class lines. I want to say that what we did is we helped paint new helmets for the first phase class. I forget what it was. We were doing something for the next class. They're like, hey guys, tonight what we're going to do is help out the guys in first phase. We're going to go ahead and stencil and set up, helmets for the whole class. I forget why we did that, but we did that like the first night. But basically they were like, look, go get supplies, make sure you're checked in. And then tomorrow we're going to go over, and I think we had a drug test the next day. And we had and I mentioned this in a post, I hate drug tests. But this one was low key. It was like you just go into the bathroom, like go pee, go see ya. What else did we do? I think we got a little more gear. I think there might have been a couple more things we were issued, maybe like white shirts or something, I forget. But it was like admin, and then it was the weekend. And basic orientation for us was going to start that Monday. And so that weekend, we went out, and I went and checked out the OBSO course, and it was like, for me, it was like so surreal because I'd spent so much time researching and kind of obsessing over buds that seeing the O course for the first time and seeing people with helmets on, like first phase, second phase, third phase, was just surreal. It was more impressive seeing buds students that I remember actually, on Thursday night, when we were there, when we arrived, Hell Week was going on. And the Hell Week class was like well into it. Class 288 was in Hell Week the week we arrived. And so I forget which night it was. I want to say it was Thursday night. It may have been Wednesday night, but it was early on. We went out to the berms on the wet side. We kind of ran out there and got up on the berms, and we looked out, and we could see the class 288 in Hell Week on Thursday beginning their around the world paddle. and we saw the instructors. And I remember I was with my friends who were all going to be in class with me, and it was like totally amazing. Like all that stuff I read about and saw videos about, like it's right there. It's happening right now. Those kids right there, some of those people right there who were flipping the boat over and like yelling hoo-yah and all this stuff, they're right there, like maybe a couple hundred yards away. There's the BUD/S instructors with their trucks and their bullhorns. It's all there. It was so inspiring. It was so inspiring. And then on Friday, when they Hell Week secured, that was our last day of admin. I remember seeing them with their brown shirts on, walking around, like hobbling around, I should say. And it was just the most inspiring thing. Like I'm doing my drug test, and I come out of the drug test, which is on the wet side, right across in the first phase barracks, and there are like actual BUD/S instructors like shaking the hands of kids that have just finished Hell Week. And I was like, I remember thinking, our class 289 is the next Hell Week. Like I'm gonna be in the next Hell Week. I mean, I guess I didn't know if I was gonna make it into Hell Week, but it's like, what I'm trying to get at is it was really, really inspiring to see BUD/S actually in person. It was the first time I ever did. And then just being in that famous BUD/S compound was really incredible. I saw the grinder for the first time. You see the bell, you see the helmets lined up along the bottom, you see the duck feet that are beautifully painted. It's totally incredible. And I remember literally just being so happy to see it. It was really incredible. So anyways, admin, check-in, we got to see the Hell Week guys, and then it was the weekend. And I don't remember being anxious. I remember being excited. It was really cool to be in San Diego and to just have the opportunity to finally be making very real progress. And then Bo started on Monday. You know what? I remember, so before I get into Bo and then when I get into first phase as well, you need to understand that the difference between Bo, basic orientation, which for us was the first, I want to say 3 weeks of training after your admin check-in and all that, and first phase. The difference between Bo and first phase, because they are somewhat similar, they really are, is that Bo is like 75% of what first phase is, on purpose. It's not because they're taking it easy on you because, they're being nice. It's because they don't want to give away what first phase is really like before you get there. They want to give you a taste of first phase because a lot of people that are going to quit at some point will probably quit relatively quickly. And so if they give a taste of first phase and make it kind of stressful and, you're doing O courses and swims and runs and you're doing stuff that you're going to do in first phase, but there's a ton of you. Way more than you're going to have in first phase. When you're in Bo, there's 200 plus people. But first phase, I don't know what the numbers are to start, but they take only 100 or something of you to start the class. And so, but Bo is it's not really shock and awe. It's not fun. It's hard, but it's more. It's like the JV version of BUD/S, and then first phase is varsity, right? So just know that, but do know that there's going to be a kind of feel that you're going to get from your instructors and from anybody that interacts with you. They're going to make you feel like, oh, you think this is hard? You think Bo is hard? Wait until you get to first phase. That is something that is definitely part of the course. There's going to be reminders. Like, let's say you're doing an O course, and because you do have structured things you got to do every week. You got to do O courses. You got to do, what do you call it? 4-mile runs. You got to do 2-mile swims. Like, if you struggle with any of that stuff, they're going to be like, oh, you're struggling now. Wait till you get to first phase. Wait till you get to phase when the standards are even harder. Or if you fall behind on, a grinder workout, which, by the way, everybody does sometimes. I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people do. They're going to come over to you and be like, you can't even handle it now. This is Bo. Wait until you get to first phase. So just know that that's part of it. They want you to fear what's about to happen. When in reality, first phase is a lot of shock and awe, and it's a lot of yelling and anxiety. But it's physically it's harder than Bo, but maybe not by much. I mean, the expectations are you're going to do your O courses and runs and swims, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, bow is supposed to be 75% or less than of what first phase is going to be. But they're going to make you think that this is nothing compared to first phase. I remember we ran past our class when we were in bow. We ran past our first phase cadre that we had not been introduced to, because you have a different set of instructors for bow. They're SEALs, they're intense, they treat you like shit, but they're not your first phase cadre. The first phase cadre they're like the rock stars of the whole command, really, of the Buds command. They look like savages, they act like savages, and everybody's scared of them. The Buds, from the Buds student perspective. And we ran past who was going to be our first phase proctor, because you have a lead instructor for every class. You have a lead instructor in addition to the other instructors that are there, and he's this beast of a man, huge, just a complete beast, like one of the most big barrel-chested dudes I've ever seen. And we ran past him, and he stopped us as we're running past him over near medical. It was just by chance we were running past him, and he just looks at us. And he calls over the class leader, who is our OIC, and he says something to him. And then the class leader says, "Hoo-yah, instructor so-and-so." And he gets back in formation, and he goes, "Come on, guys," to the OIC, and we all run away. And everyone's wondering, what did our class proctor say to our OIC? And so we run away from medical, we run back to the dry side where we were heading, back to our barracks where we're safe, and the class OIC made us made a little classroom circle. He said, "Okay, guys, I know you all want to know what he said to me. All he said was, your first phase is going to be fucking biblical." And then he walked away. So it's there is a lot of build up to first phase. But bow, during bow, you will do timed runs, timed swims, and obstacle courses. You're going to do ruck runs, you're going to do long sand runs, you're going to do grinder PT, and really not that many people are going to quit, but some will. But really what's going to happen is they're going to start seeing who are the best performers just based on your times. Who are the best runners, who are the best swimmers, who are the best people at the O courses. And, as long as you're performing the way, I don't know what the standards are, so I'm not going to make up some numbers, but you need to be in the upper percentage of your class, but it's not like the upper 10%. It's like the upper 80% of your class. And usually the people that struggle to pass are people that are hurt or who are significantly bad at one thing. So just do well, get in the upper percentage of the course, and you'll be fine. You also have to do a couple test gates. There's the 35-meter underwater swim, which I forget if that's pass-fail. I think it is, where you go to the pool one day and you swim across and you swim a push and two pulls and you pop up to the surface. And it's very easy. I don't remember anybody failing that. I think you do knot tying, but it's simple knot tying. You got to do one or two knots or something. I don't remember any of the test gates being all that serious in bow. I just remember being getting the notion that this is nothing compared to what first phase is going to be. That's really what's drilled home, and it's the atmosphere, and people are quitting too. I mean, that's the other thing is people do quit in bow. Your classmates, there are people that are going to quit. Not that many, but people will. And as effed up as it is, it's great when people quit. It feels awesome when people quit, because every time somebody else quits, it means you're doing a good thing. You're sticking around. You're not quitting. But you go through these 3 weeks, and it's not shock and awe. It's just kind of annoying. You're doing just lots of random timed things to see who's doing well. And we did have a couple beatdowns. Nothing crazy. Remember halfway through bow, mid week 2. They randomly showed up at our barracks on the dry side, where there are times during the day where you have these very small windows where the class can kind of kick back and relax for a minute, because you're kind of in hiding, and your leadership will be okay, guys, we have 20 minutes till we got to run back over to the wet side to do an O course. And so for 20 minutes, everyone kind of kicks back and throws in a dip or whatever they do, and just waits for 20 minutes. People try to sleep for a few minutes. That's you'll see it. You'll know what I'm talking about. When you have even 10 minutes off, it feels like an eternity, and people just totally kick back and relax. And the instructors showed up right in the middle of one of our break times, and they did a random room inspection, and we weren't ready for it because how could we be? And they found I forget what they found. It was some infraction. I'm sure they were just going to find something to use as ammo to say we were screwed up. And they came out and they were like, who, had this thing? I think it was like open food or something. Or maybe somebody spilled rice. I think that's what it was. They spilled rice, or I don't know, some minor infraction. And so, of course, like half of us have our boots off, because that's another thing when you're like relaxing, like you take your boots off to like air your feet out. And all of a sudden we're like doing push-ups and sit-ups and burpees and this and that. But honestly, the beatdowns are nothing really compared to what they are in first phase. So again, everything you experience in bow, it's like the JV version of buds. Really, it's just kind of checking boxes. And then finally, when you get to the end of bow, I forget how this is done, but I remember like knowing that I was going to be going to first phase, because again, not everybody gets to go. Towards the end of that last week, I think they might have even like notified who's going to phase. There was like a list of people that were going and a list of people that were not. And we were given our helmets. We got our helmets, and we had we put our stencils on our camis. They gave us camis to stencil up, even though we already had camis and stuff. And that's you initially are issued camis. That's the other thing I totally overlooked. You're given camis that you stencil with your name. But you're given new stuff for first phase, including like, a knife if you've already got that. You have all this stuff, your UDT life vest, but you got to put stencils on it, your name. And because buds is buds and you're about to be first phase, like everything needs to be perfect. And so you really spend that whole weekend leading up to that Monday, which is the start of first phase, not only transitioning from the barracks on the dry side to the first phase barracks, because you now need to be living in the first phase barracks come that Monday. So you use the weekend to move over. You need to make sure all of your stencils on all of your gear, and there's a ton of it, are perfect. And they'll teach you how to do it and everything. But we spent that weekend like nervously, stenciling all our gear and making our boots shine, because one of the first things you do in first phase is an inspection. It's kind of a known thing. I think that we were able to pick our rooms, and so I roomed with 3 of my other buddies, who actually all of them made it through. One of them is a member of Elite Meet making his way out. Another one got out as well, and then another one's still in. But all 4 of us ended up making it. But we moved into this room, and it was the rooms. So the rooms in on the dry side in bow are open bay, meaning again it's just a big open room with bunk beds. And there's actually a bunch of open rooms. It's not just one room where everybody's in. It's like 5 or 6 different rooms in this kind of building. It almost looks like a school, like an elementary school, like a 2-floored school with like kind of big rooms, except instead of classrooms, it's like, bunk beds. When you go to the Buds compound and you're sleeping in the first phase barracks, which is inside of that gated area, those are actual like suites where it's 4 to a room with 2 bunk beds. There's a little desk that runs across the side of the room. It's just like it juts out of the wall. It's just a strip of wood that's like against the wall that you can put chairs under and you can like write on and stuff. And there's a window that looks out, and you're connected to the hallway, and across your hall there's 5 or 6 other suites that are all near you. It's a lot like a college dorm if you've been in college. In fact, it's a college dorm. That's totally what it is. And we moved into that weekend. I would say that the thing with being on the dry side that you immediately miss as soon as you move into the wet side is that on the dry side, you're not under the microscope constantly, because you're not surrounded by the SEAL teams and the Buds compound and Warcom. You're kind of like hidden away. And so on the weekend or just in the evening when training's done, you could like go outside and could walk around, and you can go to the necks, and you can go do whatever you want to do, because like you're not in phase yet. Now you can't just screw off, but you're kind of not being looked at. But when you've moved into the wet side, I mean, you are inside, you're in the devil's den at this point. I mean, you're literally like a stone's throw from the grinder, and there's Buds instructors that check in on you there to make sure no one's effing around. And it's just like, you feel like, okay, now I have to like hide in my room because you don't want to go outside. And again, anywhere you go, because you're on the wet side, you got to go with a swim buddy. So if you want to go, over to the surf mart, you have to go with someone. You got to run there, even when you are off duty. And don't quote me on this because this probably is actually wrong. But I remember running everywhere, even when we were not actually training during the day. Like in the evening, if I was on the wet side and like wearing civilian clothes, because we're not training, the day is done. I was still running with a swim buddy if I was on the wet side, because you just don't ever want to be stopped by an actual SEAL or instructor and be like, why the fuck are you walking? Aren't you a Bud student? Oh, you're a fucking first phase student? Oh, roger that. I'm going to go tell the cadre that you were like doing XYZ. So there's paranoia, so you just want to like always be running around and kind of doing what you need to be doing. And anyway, so you move in that weekend, and it's like everybody knows that come that Monday, this thing that you've been thinking about for many of you months, maybe even years, is finally going to happen. And even though you've just now gone through all of Bo, and you've been surrounded by kids that have been in buds, and you do have a grasp at this point, you really do, of what buds is. You've done O courses, you've done swims, you've used the gear you're going to be using, you've seen other classes in Hell Week and second phase and third phase. You're kind of in it now. So your mindset is not what it is this second as you're listening to this. It's like you've been there, you've seen it, you know what it is, you've tasted it. But there's this huge unknown that your whole class is wrestling with the exception of the people that have been there before, because there are going to be some people in your class who have been to buds before. They're going to be trying, hopefully, to offer some meaningful and helpful advice. But everyone's grappling with, okay, our class is starting tomorrow. Like tomorrow it really begins. And no one really knows what it's going to be like. And it's not stressful. It's scary to a degree, but it's excited. That's the word. People are excited. There's a buzz in the barracks before first phase starts. It's like, okay, we prepped all our gear, we stenciled everything, we're in our rooms, everything's great. And all we know about tomorrow, because the night before, or maybe that Friday before, your leadership has given the schedule of what the first day is going to be. All we know is that, okay, guys, in the morning we're going to have an inspection at 4 a.m. on the grinder, and then we're going to have, a swim, and then we're going to have an O course. It's like it's built out, but all you know is the first thing that you're doing for us was going to be a PIBI. That's the acronym. It's a personnel inspection / barracks inspection. And a PIBI is basically, that's when you see all the kids on like the Class 234 documentary, like them throwing their stuff on the ground and saying you failed and drop, go get wet. Like that's what you're going to be doing. So for us, our first thing was a PIBI. And so over the weekend, everybody diligently cleaned their rooms and did it as best as they could. And they got their uniforms starched and stenciled and beautiful. And there's all sorts of, and by the way, you'll be given like where the best places to go to get haircuts, where the best places to go to start your uniforms. That's stuff that a rollback, kind of regardless of their status, would know. So you don't have any issues figuring that stuff out. But you have everything ready. And then you go to bed. And what I did is I slept in a sleeping bag on top of my rack, because you do need to keep your rack made. And it's just, for me, it was easier not to sleep in my sheets. I just made my bed as much as I could, and then I just put a sleeping bag, which I bought at the Nex, actually in San Diego on the dry side. I put that on top of my bed. And, I went to bed. And then that morning, the following morning, it was like all hell had broken loose when I woke up. We were supposed to start, I want to say, at 4. But, and I think this is true of probably every course, maybe not, but the instructors had ambushed us at like 3:30. And they were like running around the barracks like, you're fucking late. Why the fuck aren't you out on the grinder? Get the fuck out to the grinder. Like, and I remember our room was like scrambling, like waking up, like in a full panic. I'm on the top bunk, and I like leaped down and like kind of fell on the ground. And we're like trying to get our gear belt on we were trying to put our camis on, and instructors are running in, like, what the fuck are you doing? Drop. And like everyone's dropped and doing push-ups. It's chaos in the hall. Kids are like running down to the grinder, but because everyone's all like jacked up and not thinking, you can't go anywhere without a swim buddy. And so guys are leaving people behind in their room to go out to the grinder where they're being told to go and screamed at to go, but they're going alone. And so the instructors are waiting for them outside. Anyone who shows up outside of the barracks alone, not with a swim buddy, they immediately send them to the surf. And like, oh, it's just a fucking shit show. And like, you know, so I managed to put my stuff on, and I remember basically keeping a cool head. And I waited for my swim buddy, who ended up being my longtime swim buddy all the way through training. Even though I got rolled and he got rolled, we were basically together like 75% of the time, like every swim, dive, you name it. And the two of us remember looking at each other like inside the threshold of our barracks, and you just hear chaos in the halls. And it's just instructors yelling, and it's 3:30 in the morning, and you're like, what the fuck? And we looked at each other. I remember just smiling and being like, all right, dude, you ready? And he's like, all right. And we ran outside, and we ran downstairs, and we went out to the grinder, and it's just like, it's everything that I remember from class 234, that documentary, was happening. You know, it's like there's instructors on bullhorns screaming. There's a hose being fired off on the grinder at all the kids. And like there's a contingent of people running to the surf through the break in the berms to get wet and sandy. And then on the grinder, you just hear people counting out reps of maybe it's jumping jacks, push-ups, whatever it is. And then there's people being inspected who are standing on these duck feet as a host of instructors are walking around like screaming at them for fucking up their uniform. And it's chaos. It's absolute chaos. And I remember that as soon as we went outside, as we're making our way over to the grinder, but before we could actually like kind of assess the scene of what was actually happening, we started to hear it. The ring of the bell. Ding, ding, ding. People started quitting. And it sounds crazy for the people that have never been there. The idea that you would go all the way through boot camp, through prep, through bow, and you get to the first day, the first few minutes, and that you would quit. But remember, I told you when I was talking about the people that, you know, that are rollbacks in bow, many of them are just not going to make it. And so there's a group of people that they're not going to make it through training, and they probably know it. And so it's honestly the best time to quit is right up front before you've sacrificed anything. And so you see a wave of people will start quitting. This day, I remember something like 15 people quit in the first hour. And for the people that stuck around, they recall that day, and they recall how satisfying it was hearing the bell ring. Not because you want people to fail. That really isn't the sentiment. People are not mean and mean-spirited and like F you. It just meant that you were succeeding. It's almost like as other people are failing, it just means that you're succeeding because you're not quitting. And so anyways, we get to the grinder, we get inspected. I failed my inspection, obviously. Like everybody pretty much failed the inspection. I had my stupid starched uniform on, and they were like, oh, fail. You had an Irish pennant, which is a loose thread, and it was like impossible to keep off of your uniform. And so me and my swim buddy ran to the surf, and if you fail but your swim buddy passed, well, too bad, because the guy who failed needs a swim buddy, so you both got to run to the surf and get wet. We ran back, and you're dripping wet. It's like it's pitch black out, and your adrenaline is jacked up. You're not even cold yet. You're just like, what is going on? And so for like an hour or two, it's just people scrambling to wake up, put their shit on, get out to the grinder. Again, if you're running out without a swim buddy, people are just screaming at each other too. Like, I think the goal of that first minute is to really break apart the communication and show how messed up your class is. Like, there's no communication. People are mad at each other, screaming at each other. The instructors are really, really ratcheting up the aggression and screaming. It's chaos. It's supposed to be. But if there's an element of not fun, because it's not fun, but it's amazing to be a part of. The same way I was just struck by just physically seeing the obstacle course, the famous O course for the first time, and seeing kids that are actually in buds for the first time. Like, it was amazing to be a part of this scene. And so after, what seemed like quite a while, we heard the bell ring a bunch. We went out for a long run on the beach. I think it was not a timed run. It was just like a couple miles of just a super fast-paced run. And actually, so just super fast run. And then it was like, okay, now we're going to do a timed obstacle course. We're going to do boats and logs. And, the day kind of started, and the sun came up, and it was like, okay. And so instead of getting into like every single thing we did, I'm going to kind of pause there and talk a little bit about because I really wanted to get up to first phase and kind of pause it there. And maybe the next installment we can talk about what first phase was like almost start to finish. But the first day of first phase is a shit ton of exercise. It's a shit ton of calisthenics. I mean, pretty much all day. You're that first few hours, I'm sure it differs class to class, but it's the shock and awe. People are quitting. You're like running around. You're doing surf torture. You're doing boats. You're doing logs. You're going crazy. You're doing a ton of stuff. So the first day you are going nuts, and it's supposed to be that way. I would say that the level of intensity is very, very high physically. Those first few days, it doesn't taper off, but it kind of does towards the end of that week. And not to the point where you're like, oh, this is easy, but you get into a rhythm, so to speak. But the first few days of first phase are a lot of calisthenics, a lot. They are absolutely looking for people that are not physically prepared, that are not mentally prepared. But remember, as I've said many times before, you can't really be actually ready for the sheer volume of physicality of buds, but you can be in really good shape. And you can be willing to keep going even when you've got nothing left, right? It's not like, oh, good, I'm able to do 6 billion sit-ups. I trained for this. No, it's you got in really good shape and you're mentally prepared for this to suck. And that's the people they're looking for. The people that didn't prepare mentally or physically, those guys quit in the first few days. In fact, the huge percentage of people that are going to quit, the most people, I should say, of the people that quit in first phase, I think the majority quit in the first week, especially those first few days. And then another big swath of people that quit is in Hell Week. So that is really that actually took an hour to get through all that, but I think that's actually going to be very useful. Maybe we'll just do like a series of parts here. We'll do, so this was, buds prep to the start of first phase. And then next week we'll do first phase. We'll probably have to do those first 3 weeks of first phase and then Hell Week in one installment. And then I don't know about post Hell Week or not, but if we can fit it into one episode. But I think this is actually going to be pretty valuable, the breakdown of the whole course. That way you guys can listen to this a couple times and you can hear start to finish, what buds is like. But I do want to just throw out there a couple things. There's two things that have come up quite a bit: injury prevention and kind of like the mentality going into all this. For injury prevention, I'm not, a physical therapist or something, but there's a couple things that you should be doing, whether or not you're dealing with these issues or not. This is especially important in bow. It's important starting now, but it's especially important before you start first phase and then when you're in first phase, if you can swing it. The number one thing that you should be doing, in my mind, is rolling out your IT band. So you get a foam roller, get the stiffest one you can find, and just Google how to roll your IT band. IT as in India Tango, IT. It's on the side of your hip down to the side of your knee, and you basically lay on your side and roll this thing up and down and really grind it into that IT band. You do it on both sides. I would do that in the evenings in Buds Prep, because that's where I learned about it, and I really took that to heart. I did it when I got to San Diego, and I tried to do as much as I could throughout the course, because your IT bands are going to get so tight in buds from being cold, from shivering, from running, from doing all this stuff. When those bands tighten, they don't hurt. Your knee hurts. You don't feel it on the side of your legs where the IT band is. You feel this excruciating pain in your knees. I believe that's where you feel it. Now it's funny, I don't remember how it felt, but I remember it being absolutely miserable. But if you roll out your IT band, it's preventative. And if you are experiencing that pain from your IT band, rolling it out, you'll actually feel the difference. So it's extremely important you roll out your IT band. Make that a habit right now. Learn how to do it the correct way. Don't just gun deck it and buy a foam roller and say, I'll just figure it out. Go online, Google it, and figure out the right way to do it, because it's one of the best preventative measures, because it's horrible. When your I actually let my IT band get way out of control in prep before I started doing it, rolling it out, and it made a huge difference when I started doing it. But I was like, man, I don't know if I can do anything if this is how much pain I'm in. So that would be number one. The other thing is, so chafing, this is not something that you can really prevent. So this is not injury prevention. This is just a thing I want to make a note of. Chafing is part of this course. It sucks. You have to accept that it's going to happen. In some cases, especially in your crotch, it's going to be extreme, like horrible, horrible chafing. Unfortunately, it just kind of gets worse. You need to go in understanding that that's part of the course. There's only so much Vaseline you can use before it comes off. There's only so many compression shorts you can try. And by the way, I don't think you can use compression shorts in first phase. You can only use them like in, I forget when. They give you some outlines of what you can and can't use. But the point is like chafing, especially in your crotch, is really, really painful. Accept it. Do what you can to minimize it when you can, whether it's, again, Vaseline, finding ways to change what you're wearing, I don't know, but like just know that's part of the course. The other thing, cramping at buds is definitely a thing. Make sure you're hydrated. That's a big injury prevention thing. You should be hydrating all the time. Even if you're not thirsty, you should be hydrating, because that's the number one way to prevent cramping, because you're doing so much physical exercise, charley horsing in your hamstring. I mean, that'll keep you from being able to do anything. But you can prevent it by drinking a lot of water. So number one is roll out your IT band. Number two for prevention is going to be drink tons of water. And understand that chafing, you can prevent it to a degree, but it's part of the course and everybody deals with it, especially in Hell Week. That's the worst chafing I've ever had in my life. Waking up from your naps that you take, the little couple hour naps that you take on days 3 and 4, when you get in the water for the first time, because they make you jump in the water, you've dried off a little bit, and the salt water hitting the chafe in your crotch may be one of the single most painful things I've ever felt in my life, and I've been blown up. I've had shrapnel shred through my legs in Afghanistan, and the chafing in buds was actually more painful. It literally felt like someone was pouring acid on my junk. It was fucking horrible. So, but it's short-lived, but it makes you want to cry. It's literally that painful, and everybody goes through it. It's like a rite of passage. So if you're getting chafing, do your best to control it, but there's only so much you can do. The other thing is shin splints. Shin splints are pretty common. In fact, they're very common. Unfortunately, there's very little you can do other than try to run with proper form, figure out how to do that. If you're getting shin splints in buds prep, that's a good time to be asking some of your coaches about proper running form, making sure you're using the right shoes. But to be honest, like, it's from repetitive use. I'm pretty sure that you're getting these little splinters in your bones. It's called shin splints. I believe the only way to actually cure it is to stop running. And you can't really do that. So shin splints are something you need to just kind of suck it up through. Another thing to understand about phase, and when I say phase, that's another way people describe it when you're in phase. It could be first, second, or third, but when you're in phase, people get sick. People get BCG, ICG? What the hell is it called? VCG. There is a stomach virus, and it's actually from ingesting feces. And when you're in the water in down near Mexico, there's some really contaminated water, and there's just, this stuff gets spread all over the place. Getting VGE, Victor Golf Echo, VGE. You can Google this, VGE. It's like Montezuma's Revenge, like vomiting and diarrhea. People get that at buds. And I know some people that have been able to suck it up and get through the course while having it. And in Hell Week, it's very common. But know your limits. There's not much you can do. I mean, I'm a total baby when it comes to being sick. I luckily didn't get sick much. Really, with the exception of at the very end of Hell Week, like literally Friday morning, I got VGE, but it was a minor case. I knew people that had VGE all the way from Monday to Friday the whole time and couldn't eat and were shitting and vomiting the whole time, who made it. I don't know if I could have done that. If I'm being honest, I don't think I would have. I know myself well enough to know that I'm weak when it comes to having the flu or something. But know that it's part of the deal, and so mentally prepare to literally, on top of all the bullshit you got to do, you get sick too, which sucks. So I don't know if there's a way to deal with that or what, but just know that that's part of the course too. And then, okay, I'll end it on one last thing, and I've talked about this a bunch, but since we're talking about the first day of first phase, you may be doing the 50 meter underwater on the first day. We did ours on Tuesday, the second day. I don't know if that's a standard, but I know it's one of the, if not the first, test gates of phase when you get into first phase. And everybody freaks out about it. I did too. I, over the past few months, have talked to a number of people that are in the pipeline, are in prep, and have gone to San Diego and taken the 50 meter underwater. And we spoke, and I hope they're listening to it. There's a couple people that are actually, I think, members of the Operators Association that I'm talking about. I've spoken to people that were super nervous about doing the 50 meter underwater, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's 2 full lengths of a Olympic-sized pool on a single breath hold. You don't kick off the wall when you first jump in. You jump in. Underwater, you do a front flip, and then without kicking off the wall, you swim 25 meters, touch the wall, turn around, kick off that wall, swim back, touch the wall you started from. That's the 50 meter underwater. It is a long time underwater on one breath, and it's very stressful to think about before you do it. And so lots of people, also it's common knowledge that it's one of the first test gates you do. And so it's one of the things that people stress about quite a bit. And the advice I give to the 2 people that I'm talking about specifically that I spoke to when they were in prep, and they have since, one is not in the course any longer. He was dropped for performance in first phase. The other is doing well as far as I know. He's actually, I think he's in second phase now. Anyways, they had all the same concerns and were nervous about it, and then they went out and did it, and it was easy. And when I talked to them afterwards, they were like, yeah, that was nothing. But obviously, until you've done it, you haven't had the experience, and it's stressful to think about. My advice is this. The 50 meter underwater is designed to be a mind fuck. It's put at the beginning of training of first phase to be a mind fuck. It's the first serious test you got to take in buds. They make it early, and they make it seem scary. When you do the 25, when you're practicing the 25, you know you're only doing one length. And so when you do one length, you're as soon as you get in the water, you know it's just going to be one length. You know it's not 2. And so you're kind of rushing through it, and you get up and you surface and you're like, damn, I have to do another one of those. But when you're doing the 50, you know it's a marathon. You know it's 2 lengths. And so when you get in and you start swimming at the bottom of the pool and you get across, you're not even thinking about coming up. You're thinking about, okay, this is long. I'm just going to keep going, go slow. And you turn around and you go back. It's just far easier than the 25. I found the 50 to be easier than the 25 because it was longer, and I went in thinking this is going to be long. If you want more information on the 50 meter underwater, I actually did a video about some tips to how to handle it. I posted it to Patreon. If you want to be directed to it, I'd be happy to share it with you. But the 50 meter is not something to worry about. It's actually one of the easiest tests that you do in buds. It's just scary to think about. So that wraps up the Operators Association podcast. If this was useful, we will continue this series, and I'll talk about first phase, start to finish, next week. All right, guys, take care. Bye.